Do we have a quorum yet?
Yes, we do.
Oh, good. And are we already recording?
Yes, we are recording.
Even better. All right, then we will call this meeting to order. And if the clerk could please do roll call and establish quorum.
Yes, thank you. Member Landry.
Present.
Member Hugh.
Here.
Member Liu.
Here.
Member Swaminathan.
Yeah.
Member Lakshman.
I'm here.
Member Tavria. Member Pacheco.
Continue on 14th Street for half a mile.
Member Souza.
I'm here.
Member Carr.
Present.
Member Lutz.
Here.
Vice Chair Hernandez.
Present.
And Chair Eldridge.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. So again, everyone, welcome to the Tuesday, January 17th, 2023 meeting of the East Bay Community Energy Community Advisory Committee. Due to certain provisions allowed in the Brown Act, this meeting is being held remotely. And are we also doing it? Is there an in-person option today?
Yes, there is an in-person option at the Oakland Center.
Is there anyone present in that meeting, members of the public or advisory committee members?
No. There's no
Okay.
members.
Just want to be able to make sure we don't leave folks out when we're calling on them. So the first thing that we're going to do is public comment, and I am going to remind the public that this item is reserved for members who wish to speak on items that are not agendized. If your item is agendized, then we will have public comment on every item. And so have we received any public comment prior to 5 p.m.? Or are there any members of the public with their hands raised?
Yes, we have received a written public comment from Edward Deja. I can go ahead and read that comment into the record, and we have one hand raised.
Okay, and is the written comment is not on an agenda item?
No, it is not on an agendized item.
Okay, great. You should set the timer for 2 minutes and read that.
Great. 1 second. Great. The following comment is from Edward Deja. It reads, with the advent of NEM 3.0, where utilities are going to cut the value of exported output of rooftop solar by 75%, will EBCE bring back the alternative of true electrical value of the actual cost of the electricity is billed for those customers with rooftop solar after April 14th, 2023, and that must be on PG&E NEM 3.0, either as new customers or when their 20 years of the old plan ends? PG&E is profit-oriented, but EBCE is a nonprofit and promotes renewable energy. Any value under 10 cents per kilowatt hour would kill additional rooftop solar in the Bay Area because no one would want to lose money owning a rooftop solar system. And that is a comment from Edward Deja.
Thank you. And I do see that we have Tom Kelly has his hand raised. Tom, would you like to speak?
Good evening, everyone, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Everyone survived the unusual storms that we've had that many of us believe are the result of our unwillingness to reduce our carbon emissions. Speaking of which, I don't know if there's anybody new on the CAC, but I've been a long time proponent of reducing carbon emissions, and the fact that EBCE has failed to do so over the last couple of years. And we hear a lot of excuses. Mr. Chazet complains that this question has been asked and answered over and over. Alex DeGiorgio says that PG&E has a lot of nuclear. But let me just say that the question hasn't been answered. EBCE was formed, one of the primary reasons was to address climate change and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. It hasn't. It's increased climate carbon emissions. It's actually about 3.5 times greater than PG&E's basic electricity. Many of the CCAs in Northern California that are almost at zero emissions do not have nuclear in their power mix at all. So I am hoping that the CAC will not be strong-armed into giving up this discussion simply because EBCE refuses to address it and complains that this question has been asked over and over and answered over and over. It has not. And if these recent storms don't convince you that we need to do something, then let me know and I'll stop bothering you guys with these kinds of concerns. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Seeing no other members of the public with their hand raised, we will go on to the next thing. Tom, I really want to address the things that you're talking about, and can you just shoot me a short email and we'll try and set up a meeting for the beginning of February to talk, or the end of this month maybe, to talk about and get a clearer grasp on the parts of your question that staff have not answered. So you have good follow through. I will trust that you've heard that. All right, so we will move on to agenda item 3, which is the approval of minutes from December 12th, 2023. Is there a motion and a second?
I'll move.
Oh, I'll second.
So a motion to approve by member Lutz, member to motion, a second to the motion by Vice Chair Hernandez. Is there any discussion on this item? Seeing none, were there any public comments submitted or any members of the public with their hand raised for this item?
You want to say something for the CD?
Excuse me.
I think that was just somebody's background noise.
There were no written comments for this item, and I do not see any hands raised for this item.
Excellent. Can you take a roll call vote?
Great, thank you. Member Landry,
Yes.
Member Hugh,
Yes.
Member Liu,
Yes.
Member Swaminathan, excuse me.
Yes.
Thank you. Member Lakshman,
Yes.
Member Taria. Member Cheka. Member Souza.
Yes.
I ran out of time. Give me 2 minutes.
Member Carr.
Yes.
Member Lutz.
Yes.
Yeah.
Vice Chair Hernandez.
Yes.
Chair Eldridge.
Yes, and if we could please move Tom Kelly out of presenter position.
My apologies.
No, that's all right. It's a lot to do all at once. It really is.
Thank you.
Thank you. So the result of the motion was?
Is approved. Minutes are
Thank
approved.
you. All right, so the next item is the chair report, and we're going to try a new thing today where the vice chair is going to give a summary of the topics that are not being discussed tonight so that the CAC is aware of what they are and can go and talk at the Wednesday board meeting if you so choose, again, representing yourself, not as the CAC, but if we are not bringing a motion together for this, then this is an item that you can take these items and go and talk to the board as yourself, as an individual. And I'll be covering what happened, like the rest of the chair report. So I am going to start. Actually, why don't we start with Vice Chair Hernandez and the summary of the items that we're not talking about tonight, and then I'll go into what happened last time.
Perfect. Thank you, Chair Eldred. There's 3 items that I'll be covering that are on the consent item for the Board of Directors for East Bay Community Energy that include the updated Code of Conduct of Interest, authorization of CEO expenditure to Mercer, and the agreement with Google. And so the first updated item is a Code of Conduct, or excuse me, Code of Interest regarding, removing a couple people from that a requirement to do a Form 700, which just discloses more about your assets and other items. But this amendment to the Conflict of Interest Code updates the general agency's positions and removes the positions of agency clerk and HR manager from the list of positions required to file a Form 700, that form I mentioned. The latter changes were at the suggestion of the FPPC, the Fair Political Practices Commission, which felt that disclosure of financial interest was not necessary for these positions. We anticipate approval to occur after the adoption of this updated Conflict of Interest Code. And thank you, Adrian, for those comments early on, using those to express what these are. Again, the second item, authorization of CEO expenditures to Mercer. The fees related to scope of work originally include an estimate of $90,000 to $135,000 based on various participation factors for East Bay Community Energy and other CCAs. It's basically a review of the agreement to see what it looks like for benefit and compensation. It's a study to really look at, okay, where are people supposed to be paid or how much, making sure they're aligned with the market. That's something that I've seen in the past, undergone. Seems a little expensive, that's my comments, but it's $100,000 of the threshold for CEO signing authority. During this process, other CCAs opted out of a couple of components in the studies, which left to a larger cost burden for East Bay Community Energy. I think it's important to make sure that people who are doing work for East Bay Community Energy, my opinions, they're compensated well in market and fairly, of course. The other item here is an agreement to adopt a resolution authorizing the CEO to negotiate and execute an agreement with Google for a term of 3 years in order to benefit from 5% discount and standard pricing from Google for East Bay Community Energy's use of the Google Cloud platform in exchange for a commitment to spend over $450,000 in those 3 years. The East Bay Community Energy staff expects this to save us or the organization $22,500 over 3 years. It is a pay-as-you-go contract, and they're going to have a contract not to exceed. They're expected to offer the agency savings overall, and they don't expect this to exceed the funds budgeted for this purpose. That's my vice chair support of the chair report. Chair Eldred.
Thank you, Vice Chair Hernandez. I really appreciate it.
Pleasure.
A lot. All right, so there's a couple things that happened last meeting that I want to cover and kind of what those implications are moving forward for us. So during the last meeting of the Board of Supervisors, there were the things that were on the agenda and the things that were not on the agenda but still happened. So the things that were on the agenda that we should be aware of here, notes, the Google Cloud agreement passed, there was some really good discussion around NEM 3.0, the amendment to block power passed, and this is actually a really good example where a member of the CAC went to the meeting, spoke to the board meeting, spoke as themselves, and offered some really substantial and good feedback to the board as an individual because it was not on the CAC agenda. And so I just really want to thank Jim for doing that. That was really good. We can't always get to everything in each meeting. Yeah, that's just, it's a really good part of that. So EBCE staff was awarded they got an award from the EPA, the National Notable Achievement Award, for their work. It's really cool. And if you want more information on that, we can send that out, but we would like to congratulate staff for being recognized on such a national level for their leadership and thought into what's going on with our EV charging stations and transformation of brownfield sites. And those, it's a really cool thing that they're doing, and I'd really love to learn more about it, but well done for being recognized on that level. The things that happened that weren't really on the agenda is that it was the last meeting for a lot of our board members, including our chair and vice chair who chaired that meeting and was also the head of the executive committee. It was her last meeting. And so we've had a pretty substantial turnover on the board. And what that looks like. So if anyone is able to be in Oakland at 5 o'clock, which like I would love to be at the meet and greet tomorrow. Like I would really love to be there because I do believe that distance bias is real, but 5 o'clock is not a time that I could make to Oakland from work. So, but if anyone is able to, there is a meet and greet where you can meet the new board tomorrow between 5 and 6 before the board meeting starts. And I really encourage you to go if you can be there. And the new chair is Dan Ariola from Tracy. And Dan has board meetings on Tuesday nights, the first and third meeting of the month. So he cannot be at our meeting tonight. If our meeting next month is on a Monday, he will come to that meeting. We talked today. And what we'll be doing is, so you should be prepared for this, an exceptionally brief introduction to this is who the constituent groups that I represent or the expertise that I bring to this body, but not a 5-minute thing like a here's this, and then what your focus is for the CAC. And truly, if you could write that and send it to me so that I can leave him with a packet and maybe even give that to the board so that they understand that when the CAC gives recommendations, that this is coming from a broad, it's a real broad perspective. Staff has done an incredible job creating a heavyweight CAC. You all are amazing. And something that talks about where you are coming from, your expertise, the constituent groups that you represent, your point of view, and what your priorities are. I think it'll really help the chair understand who we are when we're making these recommendations, right? So hopefully, well, actually, Adrian, do you know if the meeting next month is on a Monday or Tuesday? I know it's like President's Day or something like that.
Which
or
meeting?
Lincoln's birthday. The CAC meeting next month in February.
In February? I think it's on a Monday. I'm checking this now. Yes.
Okay, cool. If it's on a Monday, he'll be there. And if it is not on a Monday, he'll be there the month after that. So yeah, Monday, February 13th is what it says. So be prepared for that for next month. And this will be a really good opportunity also with this new board for you to start meeting your representative on the board if you don't know them. And if you don't know how to reach out to them or have never talked to them before or something like that, reach out to me. I'm more than happy to connect you. I'll do that with Adrian. But it would be really great if you could meet your board member. So that is pretty much the chair report. And was there any public comment on that? And I see your hand raised, Cynthia. Is there any public comment on that or submitted in writing or any members of the public with their hands raised?
We have not received any comments, any written public comment for this item.
Okay, and I do not see any members of the public with their hand raised. Member Landry?
Thank you. I did want to, when Vice Chair Hernandez was speaking about the Form 700, I know, Olivia, that, and Olivia, that we have had the attorney come to our meeting, and, you know, she gave a training and we were able to sign off on that Form 700. And I wonder if that could be arranged. I presume that we're going to have a Form 700 due, I think around, is it April 1st or somewhere in that area? And I think it would, you know, it would certainly be a lot easier if we could have the attorney come and complete it, you know, do the ethics training, which I recall, and, you know, just get it done instead of taking it home and doing it in that format. So I don't know if you have any ideas about that, but I would like to suggest.
We can definitely take a look at doing that when it comes time. Thank you for the suggestion.
All right, thank you.
It's solid, Cynthia. Okay, seeing no further discussion, we did have staff request to come and talk with us about the RFO long-term contracts for approval. And so we will move on to that item, which is agenda item 5. And who is, it's Marie is presenting this. Yeah, hi, welcome.
Hello. I'm here to give you an overview of 3 contracts that I'm taking to the board for authority to finish negotiating and then execute. We'll be taking the deals to the board tomorrow night. And this is a continuation of the 2022 long-term resource RFO. We brought the first couple of contracts to the board in October, bringing some more now, and we'll be wrapping up, knock on wood, in February. Next slide, please. This is sort of an overview of the topics that I'll be going through tonight. Since I have largely given this presentation before, I'm going to move pretty quickly through the solicitation overview and evaluation process, and try to focus conversation on the actual deals that we seek to execute. Next slide, please. As a reminder, the purpose of the RFO that we launched was largely twofold. Number one, EBCE is a young organization, and we are still in the process of executing long-term contracts, long-term hedges to meet the energy and related product needs of the customers that we serve. And so we launched an RFO in 2018, 2020, 2022. We're going to go to market again in 2023 with another one. That this is all part of the process of building our long-term resource portfolio. The other reason for the 2022 RFO was to meet some explicit procurement directives that we were ordered to perform from the Public Utilities Commission. Next slide. There were 6 products that sellers could offer to us through the RFO. This is a list of them. The majority of them tie to terms or characteristics that the CPUC ordered us to procure. Next slide. The response to the 2022 RFO was good, but it was not as robust as the 2020 RFO. And I've spoke about this before. I'm sorry, just one sec. So I did highlight before that we had offers from six different states, I should say. Most of the offers were for California resources. and that only one, at the time that we received offers in the RFO, I want to say it was back in April of 2022, there was only one project in East Bay's service territory. There was a project in Tracy, offered to us in Tracy. Since that time, East Bay's service territory has expanded, and we have now executed contract, or I should say, the board gave us authority and we executed contract for a project in Stockton. So the little asterisk, only one project in service territory, is in reference to a Tracy project. Next slide, please. When we evaluated the offers that we received, we evaluated based on our ability to execute with the counterparty, the competitiveness of the offer, the project development status. You can think of that as how real is the project? Is this project a ways along in its development? We also did a qualitative assessment of projects and a quantitative evaluation where we look at what we think the financial value to EBCE will be as compared to the cost that EBCE will spend paying for the generation or whatever attributes from each project. Next slide. Today, as I mentioned, I have 3 projects that I'm seeking, or that I will seek the board's authority to finish negotiations and then execute the contracts of. The first is the Kola Energy Storage Facility, which is located in Tracy. So this is the Tracy project that I alluded to, that was the one originally in service territory project. We are seeking to execute an energy storage agreement. Excuse me. It's a 125 megawatt project with 4 hours of discharge duration, so it can contain 500 megawatt hours of electricity, and it will be a 20-year contract. It's being developed by NextEra Energy, and we'll talk about it more in a couple slides. The next two. The next 2 projects are resource adequacy only projects. They're both 10-year contracts, and one is a 50 megawatt project, 50 megawatts of RA, resource adequacy only, no energy associated with it, just the compliance attribute of resource adequacy. And that first one is a solar and storage facility in San Diego, and the other is a solar only resource adequacy project that is in Arizona, but counts for California resource adequacy because of the way it is interconnected. And I'll discuss those more in the coming slides. Next slide, please. Okay, so Kola. As I mentioned, it's a 125 megawatt battery. That's what East Bay will contract for. The total project site will be 400 megawatts. There is another off-taker on the remainder of the build out at that site, but their battery and East Bay's battery, I mean, they might be right next to each other, but they are wired totally independently of each other. They have different resource IDs. They will participate in the energy market as standalone resources. It is, as I said, a 20-year contract. The expected commercial operation date is June 1st, 2025. So it will count towards the procurement requirements that the Public Utilities Commission has placed on East Bay and all other jurisdictional load serving entities. The project does have a fully executed interconnection agreement. This is a very real project. It does not currently have a project labor agreement because it hasn't started construction yet. So it will have a project labor agreement, and that is a requirement in the contract. It just does not at this time, simply because we're a little bit too far out to start construction on it. One thing, this is a weedy detail, but one thing that is a little bit different about this project than other batteries that are in our portfolio, it's a 125 megawatt battery when it comes online in year 1. By the end of its life, of its contract life, I should say, it will only count for it will only have 100 megawatts of capacity. We are taking a different approach with this contract, and batteries degrade over time as we use them. Anyone who's ever had an iPhone or an electric toothbrush will notice they don't hold their charge as well. They don't hold their charge forever. Eventually, these things, the batteries just don't work anymore. It's the same with grid scale batteries. They degrade over time with usage. And so what we are intentionally doing with this contract is we want the battery to degrade over time, but we have agreed to a specific schedule of what that nameplate capacity can be in each year of the contract. So years 1 and 2 and maybe 3, it can count for up to 125 megawatts. And at the end, it will only be 100 megawatts. If it degrades faster, we won't pay for more energy storage capability than it has. But if the battery is found to have a little bit more juice in it or a little more usefulness in it than the number that is assigned for each contract year, we will not pay for extra. We might get a little extra benefit in a given year or in a given period of time, but we will not pay for that extra benefit. We specifically wanted to take this approach with this contract because we have not taken this approach in other contracts, and the market for batteries is tight, competitive, volatile, and very expensive right now. And so we are strategically executing a contract that is for 120 megawatts now that will degrade, so that it'll give us a little bit more of an open position in the later years that we would then have to go, sign new contracts for. Next slide, please. The counterparty, NextEra, is one of the world's largest owners and operators of renewable energy. It is a holding company that owns Florida Power and Light, an electric utility in Florida. They own transmission development companies, renewable energy development. They do EVs, they do distributed energy resources. NextEra does everything. They have one of the largest financial planned dollars allocated to planned investments in North America of any electric company, holding company in North America. As the slide says, it is, and as I've described, it is a very large, diversified company. They have a team of 266 people that work across their business units in California, many of them in the Bay Area. And as a renewable generation developer and energy storage developer, they have executed contracts with quite a few CCAs already. They're just very, very experienced, a very knowledgeable counterparty. Next slide. So as I mentioned, NextEra is the only energy storage agreement where we'll get the resource adequacy and the ability of the storage to charge and discharge, where East Bay will have control of the battery and make decisions about charging and discharging and how to optimize the asset to meet our demand. The next project is a resource adequacy only project. So there is solar and storage here. It will generate electricity. It will also charge and discharge energy from its battery, but we do not get any of that energy production or the energy going in and out of the grid. We are only getting the compliance attribute of resource adequacy. What is especially valuable about this contract is that it will come online on August 1st of 2023, and we need more resources to meet our compliance obligations. Our CPUC compliance obligations, we need resources that come online in 2023, and there just are not very many of them out there. This project and the next RE-only contract technically did not come to us through the RFO. During the RFO negotiation process, some members of the Power Resources team and I reached out to entities that we know and asked different companies, do you have any projects that you can offer us? And so we evaluated some of these bilateral offers that came into us alongside RFO projects. And there are 2 projects that we see value in executing. This is one of them. This project, because it is coming online quite soon, it's also a very mature project, and they have executed a project labor agreement. They are at the place where they are starting construction very, very soon. Next slide, please. The company that is developing the project is called Ocotillo Solar. The company that is developing Ocotillo is called Vital. Vital was founded in 1966. It has it has 750 megawatts of wind and solar projects in operation and 2 gigawatts in the development pipeline across the United States. They do have a team based in California, and they have worked with community choice aggregators, public utility districts, and utilities in California. And although it's an old company, they're just not a huge company like NextEra is. So they've worked with more of a handful of different companies in the state. Next project, or next slide, please. This project, Long Road is the developer. The project name is Sun Streams 2. As I mentioned with Ocotillo, this was also originated bilaterally. It is a 150 megawatt solar farm in Arizona. I can't say it's a 50 megawatt RA contract like I can with Ocotillo, because of the way that the RA value is accounted for by the Public Utilities Commission. You get a different amount of RA from solar for every month of the year. So in July, this project is worth, I want to say 17 megawatts. I don't remember off the top of my head, but in January, it's worth 0. So we get different amounts of RA for different months of the year. We are only paying them for the RA that we get each month. This is also a 10-year contract. What is special about this project is it counts for compliance with the Public Utilities Commission's procurement mandate. And this is the most de-risked project of them all because this one is online already. It is delivering electricity and renewable energy certificates to a large tech company off-taker, and the capacity value, the resource adequacy value is not something that the tech company has any need for. So Long Road is able to sell it to us and help us meet our CPUC compliance obligations. Next slide, please. Long Road as a company is not a very mature company. However, the team that makes up Long Road is a very experienced team. The company is led by executives from a former company called First Wind Energy. Since 2019, Long Road has brought 11 projects online, including projects in California and including projects that are delivering over 400 megawatts of energy to the California grid. They currently own and operate 3.5 gigawatts of resources, and was it another 1.8 in development pipeline? I believe that's correct. I think 1.8 additional gigawatts are under development. They only have one executed long-term contract with the CCA currently, and that is a contract with Marin Clean Energy. Next slide, please. When I came to the board, when I came to the CAC and then the board back in October, I highlighted that that I would use this table to describe the projects that we're bringing for approval throughout the RFO process. So we got board approval for the 2 Broadreach RA only contracts. We're requesting authority for 2 more RA only contracts. And then there's also the storage contract that is what we refer to as a full toll. It's a contract where we're getting all of the attributes of what the storage can do, not just RA, but the energy charging and discharging as well. And I hope to be coming back with some generation projects in February. I think we're functionally at the end of the presentation. Is there another slide or two? Next steps, finalize these contracts, execute the contracts. We'll continue to monitor projects as we hit contractual milestones. And then we have an update filing to the Public Utilities Commission on February 1st, where we have to tell them how we're doing and our progress to meeting our compliance requirements from the 2 different compliance directives that they have given related to procuring new resources to date. Spoiler alert, they just released a proposed decision requiring us to sign more long-term contracts. So I'll be coming back for a while. And I think there's one more slide that just has a list of all of East Bay's current executed contracts. I should say generation and storage contracts. We don't list our RA only agreements on EBCE's website. That's it. Any questions?
We're gonna first go to the public comment questions, but just as clarification, this is a proposed decision that requires you to sign more long-term contracts when you very specifically stated that this is not the time that you would want to sign long-term contracts. Is that right?
Yes, and price-wise, I mean, everyone in the last few years has experienced some form of supply chain pain. Supply chain is a big problem. Everything is more expensive. We all know about inflation. That's why it isn't a good time to be signing new contracts, long-term contracts for resources. It doesn't matter. It's not a good time. Just based on economics, I wouldn't be going out and signing new contracts right now, but the state does need new generation resources. And while staff may not share the perspective of certain community members in terms of how we are decarbonizing and our progress to doing it, staff and the community are aligned on goals to decarbonize the grid. And so we have to make long-term commitments and put steel in the ground so that we can do that. So just based on economics, not the best time to sign contracts, but based on trying to decarbonize the grid and make sure that the grid is reliable in California, it is a good time and we absolutely have to do it.
Thank you. Thank you for that. So first we'll go to public comment and then we'll come back to questions and discussions from the CAC. So we'll ask the clerk if there was any written correspondence received on this item or any members of the public with their hands raised. Oh, you are muted.
Thank you. We have not received any written public comment for this item. We do have one hand raised for this item.
Okay. We should go to that public comment.
Okay. Tom Kelly, recognized for 2 minutes.
Thanks, Adrian, and thanks, Marie, for that. That was interesting. One thing I wanted to say was that one of the issues for me with EBCE and where they source their power is, a lot of those renewables come from out of state and they're not actually delivering electricity to the California grid. And, it gets into the whole thing about RECs and how they're applied and what kind of power is provided in lieu of that renewable power. But, these particular projects don't necessarily fit into that. But the thing I wanted to say is that we do have an obligation to find power sources that are, and I'll say local in quotation marks, somewhere close to us, in Stockton and Tracy and the Central Valley, certainly, I think would qualify for that. But I would ask the CAC to find out or to ask, is there something that we have imposed on these RFPs for power that makes it difficult for more people, more companies to apply. So for example, is it a question of price? So Marie pointed out, prices are a little bit higher, but would we not want to pay a little bit more for electricity generated in, say, Stockton than we would from San Diego or New Mexico? I think there's some value in doing that analysis rather than just saying, oh, we're not going to accept that bid from Stockton because the price is, half a cent more a kilowatt hour than the energy produced in New Mexico or Idaho or someplace like that. That gets us to the local development and ensures that we follow up on trying to build as much as we can as close to where it's actually consumed. Thank you.
There's no further public comment.
And I was muted. Thank you, Tom. Member Swaminathan?
Yes, I have two questions. Thanks, Marie, for that presentation. It was very insightful. So I have two questions. One is East Bay Clean Energy, given the IRA provides, Inflation Reduction Act provides tax credits for even for not-for-profit organizations, is there a decision or a inclination to develop projects on our own as opposed to through the private sector? That's question number one. And two, what percentage of RA is met by these three contracts? RA needs are met by these three contracts.
And actually, Marie, if you want to respond to that, and if you would want to respond to the public comment as well from Tom Kelly, I went straight into the thing I was supposed to do as opposed to giving you an opportunity to respond to anything there. So apologies.
Sure. I'll go in reverse order with Member Swaminathan's second question first. So there's two different RA like tracking or compliance obligations that we have to comply with. The traditional RA framework is our monthly, you have to have X many megawatts of RA in January, February, March. It's a different number for every month of the year. And we do have to make a showing in what's called the year ahead, where we show our progress towards meeting the monthly obligation, and then we have to do the monthly filings. Our total monthly obligation varies by month of the year. And as I alluded to, how these resources count also varies by month of the year. So I'm afraid I can't offer a straight, it will count for this much, but in terms of the monthly showings, it's not very much. It's like a drop in the bucket. For the two directives that we've been procuring towards, where we've been directed, you have to go out and sign new contracts for new resources. I'm similarly not prepared to offer a percentage, but I could at least give you a ballpark, and 10 to 15% maybe. But it's something that I could, it's not a totally clear cut and dry approach. Okay. It counts more than it does for the monthly showings. I will share that. Your question about the IRA and tax credits, we have looked into the IRA in a lot of detail and are absolutely looking for opportunities to take advantage of its provisions, both in terms of owning assets and then, are there tax incentives we can realize for work with electric vehicles? The way it works for a nonprofit local entity, it's not actually a tax credit. We're a tax-free entity anyway, so we don't get a tax credit, but we can get what is effectively a cash payment for a generation or storage asset that we own ourselves. And so we are very much considering how we can go about realizing some benefit there. We're not at we're not at a place to actually do anything with it yet, but that is something that we are looking at right now. And the contracts that we will have to use for those will be a different form of contract than any of the contracts East Bay has executed to date. So there's a lot of background work that will go into being able to do that sort of procurement.
But it's in the works, is it?
Yes, it is in the works. It's
Okay.
going to be a lengthy process.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mr. Kelly sort of was speculating on how East Bay does procurement and insinuated that East Bay is not willing to pay a premium for local resources. That is not accurate.
I would say actually, if I can reframe that for you a little bit, what I also heard a speculation, but I think what I heard him saying is that he's hoping to, or at least from our end, we're hoping to understand the way that EBCE is valuing local resources versus resources that are created farther away. As we know that economics isn't the only factor that is taken into consideration. So for us to gain a better understanding of that would be great.
So as I described, we have a qualitative evaluation rubric that we follow, and then we have a quantitative evaluation that we perform. We look at the project economics. How much is this going to cost for us to pay for the generation or the energy storage services over the life of the contract? And then what do we think the energy market revenues will be over a contract's life? So in the case of the COLA energy storage facility, how much money do we think that we can make charging and discharging every month of the year, every hour of the day for 20 years? We perform that quantitative analysis and look at cost we pay versus what we think we can collect revenue-wise. And that tells us what the net present value is of the contract. We do place a premium on local resources, and so we are willing to pay more for a local resource than we are for a resource that is further away. But once we get out of our service territory, we rely much more heavily on, is this a positive or near neutral net present value resource? So we have executed contracts with local resources that are not positive net present value, that are not neutral, and that might be negative, but it's a forecast to be negative.
That was really helpful. And in your, you said you're going to be coming back a lot.
Oh, 3 years.
We always love to see you here, so that's great. Do you, and I know that some information can't be public, but is EBCE currently evaluating other local development projects?
So not in this RFO. COLA Energy Storage is a local project. It's in Tracy, and then the projects that we brought in October. Well, one of them is local now because it's in Stockton, and so when it comes online, it's going to come online in 2024. Stockton will be part of our service territory. There were no other local projects offered to us in the 2022 RFO. The marketplace very much knows our interest and our preference for local resources, and so we will continue to look for those resources every time we go out to market.
All right, thank you. Member Swaminathan, is your hand still up or did you have another?
I just had one other follow-up question. So the Tracy project which you brought this time, did that require any premium to be paid, or was that competitive with the market?
The market has been so volatile over the course of the year. It actually did appear to be at a premium at the time that we shortlisted it, but other counterparties were unable to hold their price, and so it has it has landed at a place where it really is competitive with the marketplace right now. And that's, that also speaks to the financial acumen and strength of NextEra as a counterparty.
Right. Thank you.
That is fantastic. I have a couple questions, but they're kind of nerdy, and I don't have them well thought out at this point. If we do have questions around how some of the different resources are playing out in this, because I'm sure I will get follow-up questions on this, people can email yourself or the clerk. And
I think I see Alex DeGiorgio online, and I believe that the instruction we have is that all questions are supposed to come through Alex so that he
Great.
can make sure that things are routed appropriately. Alex, can I get a nodding up and down or a shake? Okay, that's he's saying that that's correct.
Perfect.
Thank you.
And then as these are coming down as a requirement, do we have things like demand response do those resources fulfill RA requirements, or?
Absolutely. Demand response is part of our portfolio. I describe these as a drop in the bucket to sort of like our smaller needs, and not even making some impact, but very, very small impact to our monthly obligations. The number of megawatts of RA you get with demand response is very, very small. And so we certainly procure it. It's hard to get RA right now. We'll take any RA we can get. We don't care about the source. We just want it to show up. And however, the new demand response that EBCE seeks to originate or create, that is typically done through the local programs team. The demand response that my team transacts just for RA, that's more monthly transactions in the bilateral and very liquid RA market in California. And demand response is a very active participant in it.
Great, thank you for that. Member Swaminathan, was there another, or is your hand still up? It's down. Got it. Your questions were fantastic. All right. Are there any other members of the CAC with questions on this presentation? All right. Thank you, Marie. We really appreciate it. That was a fantastic report. And
my pleasure.
All right. Have
See
a
you
great
tomorrow.
day.
Thanks.
See you tomorrow. Okay, so go back to my agenda. That was really solid. All right, so the next agenda item is agenda item 6, authorizing the CEO to negotiate agreements with Resilient Critical Facilities. Staff's recommendation is to adopt, oh wait, this is an action item, sorry, let me go back before I move on to the next thing. We can make a recommendation to the board on this, and that the request that staff is making of the board of directors is to adopt 3 resolutions authorizing the CEO to execute agreements for 3 projects awarded short listings through the 2022 long-term resource request for offers, RFO, and bilateral outreach. So staff is asking the board to authorize them to move forward with this. I would seek a motion to approve staff recommendation, or disapprove if that's the motion that you wanted to make, but Member Swaminathan, I see you.
I'll make the motion
To approve?
to approve. Yes.
Excellent. And is there a second? Yeah,
This is Vicky. I second that.
excellent. So motion to approve by Member Swaminathan, seconded by Member Souza. Is there any discussion on this item? Seeing none, can we please have a roll call vote?
Great, thank you. Member Landry,
Yes,
Member Hugh,
Abstain.
Member Liu,
Yes.
Member Swaminathan,
Yes.
thank you. Member Lakshman,
Yes.
Member Taria, Member Pacheco, Member Siegel, Member Susan,
Yes.
thank you. Member Carr,
Yes.
Member Lewis,
Yes.
Vice Chair Hernandez,
Is no longer in the meeting. He had to leave.
thank you. Chair Eldred,
Yes,
motion is approved.
thank you. And with that, we will move into agenda item 6, which is authorizing the CEO to negotiate agreements for resilient care critical facilities. I believe that JP Ross is presenting this item. That's it. That looks like a yes. All right.
Yes, I am. Good evening, everybody. JP Ross, Vice President of Local Development. So here with hopefully a good news story, which is the progression of
Totally.
our
Yes.
I'm saying it's crazy day altogether.
which is the progression of our resilient critical facilities work that we've been doing for a while. So a little bit of background. This is a program of works that we've had underway for a couple of years now. We have evaluated over 300 critical facilities that our cities have brought to us as facilities that could benefit from resilience, meaning solar and storage to provide 24-hour service or service during outages like public safety power shutoffs or floods. We have a new climate-induced catastrophe that we have to respond to now, or other types of events like earthquakes. So we've been evaluating facilities and working on a procurement program whereby we can help deliver resilience to these facilities so that they can be online during potential outages. And we're thinking that these types of facilities are kind of libraries or food banks or administrative centers or fire stations, police stations, senior centers, really across our territory. We've been doing this for a couple of years. And our plan is to really develop as much local behind the meter solar paired with storage on municipal facilities as we possibly can. So our plan is really to kind of do this first issuance, and the first action item today is really stage one, phase one, proving out this model. And then we're already engaged in phase two. And so really, pretty excited about that. So phase one is what we're bringing to you all and the board today, which is an opportunity to sign a PPA for projects on our first 4 cities. So phase one cities is Fremont, Hayward, San Leandro, and the city of Berkeley. And then we're actually already engaged with additional cities in phase 2, which right now is Oakland, Emeryville, Pleasanton, and Livermore. So a lot of our cities are interested in participating in this program. And so what we've done is really extensive amount of diligence on how to deliver solar and storage as a service to our cities. And so one of those is kind of a procurement pathway that makes it easy for cities to engage with EBCE on this type of program of works. One requirement of that is that the solar and storage resources have to be lower cost than the cities are planning to pay for energy services over the term of the contract. So think of that as a cost neutrality threshold. We must kind of be cost neutral or better in order to use this procurement pathway 421720. And that allows us to procure on behalf of our cities without having to go through an extensive public solicitation process. We do go through public solicitation, but we can kind of provide this service to our cities without them having to do that. And so phase one, as I mentioned, is 4 cities. That will total about 3 megawatts of solar PV and 6.2 megawatt hours of battery storage across these 30 facilities. And we've been investing in this for a while. So we, a while ago, got approval from the board to bring on board 2 independent engineers that we did. And we actually sent those people out to the facilities that we planned to build solar and storage on, so they could kind of do all the pre-development work, make sure that the facilities that we wanted to build on were eligible to build on and the roof could sustain it, the structure could sustain it, the electrical capacity could sustain it, or at least we knew what the costs of developing these solar and storage assets would be, so that when we went out to the market with a competitive solicitation, we could provide a lot of background information so that bidders knew exactly what they were getting into. So that was kind of one thing we did. The other thing we did is we spent a considerable amount of time developing a standard form power purchase agreement, which is a standard way that entities that can take tax credits like ourselves, like Marie was just describing, procure energy services from the market. And so we developed a standard form PPA that will be the EBCE PPA, and we got all of our cities to agree to that form before we issued it to the market. And that way we could offer one PPA for 30 projects across multiple megawatts of PV and batteries, which really reduces the cost again, because if we weren't doing this, then a developer would have to negotiate 30 individual PPAs. And as much as I love paying lawyers, that gets really expensive. And so we wanted to kind of reduce the transactions costs of the legal negotiation. So we got that agreed upon PPA with our cities and we issued that to the market. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. And then volume helps. So a lot of these projects may be small, like a fire station could be a 5, 10, 15 kilowatt PV system with battery storage. And it's hard to get solar developers interested in one 15 kilowatt project. But because we've aggregated them up, we're giving a lot more volume and a lot more certainty to the developers. And so that also kind of reduces the cost to deliver these services to our cities. Next slide, please. So, sorry, that's the slide I was just talking about. My bad. I'm glad you all have this. I was looking at my screen where I had all those bullet points fresh in my head. Yeah, glad you got that. Sorry about that first slide. I'll look at this screen now. So what is a microgrid? So a microgrid is an ongoing kind of capability of providing backup power to a facility. So in this drawing, I have the facility on the right. That's a building. Think of a library or a senior center. And then a microgrid is basically a solar system, in our case, a solar system, a battery, a controller, and then this transfer switch. So when the grid on the left goes down because of an outage, then that automatic transfer switch basically flips over and the building is operating just off the battery, the panels, and can operate in a self-sufficiency mode while the grid's not operating. We have really focused on single facility microgrids as opposed to microgrids that are multiple buildings and cross streets and rights of way. That gets very complicated and can take a lot of time. And so we've really been focusing on single buildings, even though some of our buildings are right next to each other, because we thought it was more important to get projects done and kind of prove out a lot of other components of the model compared to maybe something more complicated. So taking a simple approach, but that's a bit of a description of what it is that we're doing across these facilities. Next slide, please. So the standard, oops, it's not leave PPA, it's sleeve PPA, my bad there. So we're basically providing, we've done this standardized PPA that's we call it a sleeve because we have one PPA that we're signing with 2 different parties. So with the cities, we are the seller. So we're selling energy services and resilience to our cities. And for the asset owner, the developer, we're the buyer. So we're buying those energy services and then selling them to the city. We're marking that up a little bit to collect our administrative costs, like the independent engineers that I mentioned we'd hired to do all the pre-work and our legal work of getting a PPA kind of standardized so that we could issue it to the market. But we basically have the same PPA that we're signing with 2 different parties with us in the middle. And we're providing those kind of standardized services to our cities. They know that we're on the other side of the PPA, and even though we have the asset owners that we can call, cities are quite happy actually to have EBCE kind of as their counterparty, because they know they can call on us. They know that our board is going to have an elected member of their city forever, and so they have some recourse on us to make sure that we're providing them good service. As I mentioned, having this standardized PPA really can also reduce the legal costs for all parties. And then when we issued the solicitation, which I'll talk about in a moment, we issued this PPA out to the market and said, here's our standard PPA. You need to accept it, or at least to provide us with any red lines that they may have, so that we could use that as part of our evaluation process when we were selecting bidders, selecting vendors. Next slide, please. So with the RFO, we issued that in August, a request for offers. As mentioned, it's phase 1 cities, consist of Berkeley, Hayward, Fremont, and San Leandro. And we actually issued the solicitation kind of in 2 parts. One was the base case, which was the facilities we had a high degree of certainty that we could fund under that cost neutrality threshold. We also submitted for some federal appropriations, and were able to actually get $2 million in federal appropriations, otherwise known as the earmarks process, from the federal government. So we kind of built this additional funding case that said, look, if we can get a little bit more money for this from this federal earmark process, then let's be a little bit more aggressive and put more facilities in that we thought were kind of on the margin of being cost effective. But we knew if we got some more money, then we could increase the size of the portfolio. We did get $2 million in federal appropriations. And it looks like from the bids that we've gotten back, we'll be able to be cost effective with each of the 4 cities, because the projects need to be cost effective for each city. And so our plan really is to actually do all 30 of these projects, which really increases the size of the solar and the storage dramatically, which we're quite happy with. So we did receive 3 bids. 2 of those bids kind of moved through to the full process, which included a lot of the facility information that we gathered when we went on site, as well as the interval data that we have, so that the bidders could really understand exactly what they were going to be getting into in building these projects. And we could all agree on making sure that the usage information, and electricity usage from these facilities was well suited to solar. And so the 2 bids that we got, both used all that information. And then we did choose one conforming bid, which is the bid I'll be talking about today, from Gridscape, from a partnership team of 2 companies, Gridscape and Sunwealth. And those kind of meet our pricing, our labor, our installation quality requirements, and have kind of proposed minimal revisions to the standard PPA, such that we're confident that we'll be able to sign this PPA and hopefully actually not even have to go back to the cities to open up any conversations with the 4 city attorneys. It was great working with 4 city attorneys for like a year to standardize the PPA, but I'm also very glad to not have to go and reopen that negotiation process. And they have agreed to pay prevailing wage on these jobs, which was one of the specific requirements in the RFO. Next slide, please. So, I don't remember this slide being in here. Can we go to the next slide, Adrian? This is a bit of detail about how we provided intel information to the bidders. So all bidders, all bidders were basically given a high level of information, and then we had to sign NDAs with our shortlisted bidders so they could get kind of more detailed information. I thought this was a little too detailed for this discussion, so I don't recall putting it in here, but that's all right. Let's go to the next slide.
This is the last slide of this presentation.
Okay. Well, then I will talk through a couple of other points. So let's see. So if we go back to the previous slide, then Adrian, I will talk to it. So a little bit more about the two counterparties. So Gridscape Solutions is the developer. They'll be building these assets and doing kind of the long-term operation. They're a Fremont-based small local emerging business. They've done a lot of microgrids, including microgrids for the city of Fremont that are currently in operation. And they're currently developing more than 35 microgrids in California, a few of them with other public agencies, City of San Diego, a couple of community colleges. And as I mentioned, they've agreed to our local subcontractor and prevailing wage requirements. And then they are bringing in an external project finance asset owner called SunWealth, which is a Connecticut-based investor in clean energy projects. They have a very well-established team, project developers and investors who've been investing in a variety of clean energy projects for a while now. So they're operating over 500 commercial solar and storage projects, totaling 26 megawatts across the country. They're not totally focused on California. They actually have projects all across the country. And so that's the kind of the partnership team. We'll be signing a PPA with SunWealth, and Gridscape will be kind of the project developer. So one other thing that we're looking at doing is filing net metering applications prior to the transition between net metering 2.0 and net metering 3.0. So we've had some discussions about the net metering transition. And if we can file applications prior to April 13th, I believe it is, then we can secure a spot under net metering 2.0 versus 3.0. The impact of the net metering transition is a little bit less, quite a bit less with our projects because we're solar plus storage. And so we can kind of manage the amount of export, which is the big difference between NEM 2.0 and 3.0. But we run the analysis, there is a bit of an impact between in moving to NEM 3.0. And so we think it makes sense to get as many of our interconnection applications in prior to the middle of April so that we can secure that NEM 2.0 spot for our projects. And so what we're asking the CAC to weigh in on, and we will be asking the board to weigh in on tomorrow, is two things. One is providing authorization for the CEO to negotiate and execute a PPA with SunWealth for these projects. And then we're actually kind of speeding up the process of getting these net metering applications submitted. And we're going to need to do that prior to getting that PPA signed. So we're also asking for the board's approval to authorize us to negotiate and execute a professional services agreement through our standard consulting services template that would be an NT of $1 million to Gridscape to pay them to file as many net metering applications as we can prior to April 14th. And that's a lot of money. We've actually put a lot of money in there because our goal is to not only file as many interconnection applications for phase one, our first 4 cities, but also we have a lot of information on our phase 2 cities who have already said that they want to participate in this program. So we're also in conversations with Gridscape to get as many of our phase 2 city projects into the net metering queue so that we can try to secure a NEM 2.0 spot for really as many facilities as possible. So we're kind of putting enough funding in there for over 100 projects, even though we only have 30 projects that we currently are negotiating this PPA on. We're not necessarily going to spend all that, but we kind of wanted to have the freedom to kind of put as much into this as possible because we really are confident that we've proven out the business model of the volume procurement of the standardized PPA, of kind of pre-investing in the pre-development work so that we have a lot of confidence in the portfolio. And so we're kind of doubling down on accelerating this so that we can deliver as many of these projects to our cities as possible, which is the whole goal of this thing. So we're pretty excited for, with where we have gotten to today, and that more of our cities want to engage with us in this program and to deliver resilience. And that's the end of the presentation. Sorry, I must have given you the wrong deck, Adrian. So we'll correct that for our presentation tomorrow night.
Great, thank you.
I'm glad we could provide that run through for you to get the right deck up. That's good. There was a lot in that, and it's a lot of really awesome. But we'll go first to public comment, and then we'll come back for questions and discussion from the board. I just, as a clarification really quick before you start, that the request that you're making of the CAC tonight is authorization. Can you just tell me again the authorization that you're looking for so we can
Yep.
use correctly?
Yeah, we are requesting authorization to negotiate and execute a PPA with Sunwell for our phase 1 city projects, which is 4 projects or 4 cities, 30 projects. So that's the first action item. And then the second action item is authorization for the CEO to negotiate and execute a consulting services agreement with Gridscape so that we can pay them to kind of pre-file our net metering applications. We'll actually get that money back. When we sign the PPA, we will get reimbursed for that expense, because normally the developer would do all that work. And so, but it's a little hard for them to do all that work prior to them having a PPA. So we're basically saying, okay, in the interim, we'll sign a CSA with you, a professional service agreement. We'll pay you for that work. When we sign the PPA, we'll get that money back.
That makes sense. All right, thank you for that. Adrian, did we receive any written correspondence on this agenda item, and are there any members of the public with their hands raised?
Yes, we did receive a written public comment for this item.
Great, can you please read that into record?
Great, thank you. Okay. The following public comment is from Jessica Tovar. We appreciate EBCE moving forward to ensure the financial incentive for the Resilient Municipal Critical Facilities Program is accessed by municipalities. The CPUC's decision to scale back net energy metering, or what we refer to as local solar incentives, was counter to the need to produce more local, reliable, and truly clean energy. This is why we urged EBCE and the community to oppose Gavin Newsom's CPUC's net energy meter 3.0 proposal that scales back local solar growth in the middle of a climate crisis in California. We agree that EBCE and the cities should apply before the deadline to ensure the benefit under net energy metering 2.0. In 2021, several community-based organizations, along with East Bay Clean Power Alliance, advocated for EBCE to provide microgrids for community-based organizations. In 2022, we asked EBCE to apply for funding under the Transformative Climate Communities Grant to fund these community-based microgrids. The chair of EBCE asked that EBCE staff follow up on this grant, and there has been no communication from EBCE since then. We need the cooperation of EBCE moving forward so that our most valuable communities have access to resilient energy. It is upsetting that our community groups will no longer stand to benefit from microgrids financially. Moving into 2023, the current outages related to extreme weather, such as the current storms, show how critical it is for our community-based organizations and their members to have access to microgrids. We still stand to benefit from keeping the power on during planned power shutoffs and other unforeseen crises. We hope that you share this urgency for our needs as you have for the cities you represent. Clean power to the people. Jessica Tovar, East Bay Clean Power Alliance.
I'm glad you got the clean power to the people in there. That's great. And just as clarification in that comment, the thing that needed following up on was there would, can you just send me that comment?
Absolutely.
Thank you. All right. So, and no other written correspondence was received?
No other written correspondence was received.
Great. And I see no members of the public with their hand raised, so we will go to Member Lutz.
Yeah, JP, this sounds really great. And maybe it was in the slides that didn't show up, but how much benefit does EBCE get from controlling the storage that is available on these projects for, like the rolling blackouts and curtailment types of things? Is that under EBCE's control, or is it, how big is it and how much credit does EBC get for it?
Yeah, so we will be using that storage as a demand side load modifier, just like we're using the virtual power plant that we are operating through our Resilient Home program with Sunrun to reduce our peak demand forecast, which reduces our resource adequacy obligation. So yeah, that's a kind of product that we built, through the development of that Resilient Home program with the CEC. And so that 6.2 megawatt hours will be used to reduce our peak demand. That, needs that the value of that needs to be shared, right? So it's used for energy arbitrage for the customers. It's also used for resilience for the customers. So you have to balance how much of that battery is being used. But it's certainly our expectation and plan to be able to use the battery for that. That's going to be specific to non-demand charge based commercial facilities. When you have demand charges, the financial value of the batteries is actually really necessary to meet the cost neutrality kind of bill savings requirements. And it actually makes it hard to then save that battery for a controlled dispatch later in the afternoon, which is what we need for a load modifier. But most of these facilities are actually not on demand charges. So we'll get access to most of that energy storage for reducing our peak demand. And that will not kind of cannibalize the value to the cities.
And my guess is that at this point, it's probably a very small fraction of EBC's peak demand that you see able to.
Yes, it is.
But, if you could put it in all the sites that the cities potentially have, would it make a difference?
Sure. As Marie says, she's always buying RA. She's on the market constantly. So anytime we can save her from going to buy RA, that's a value.
Okay.
But yeah, it's small now. I think we need to figure out ways to kind of aggregate and get a little bit of control and utilize these emerging distributed resources. So this is the best way that we've found, the clearest way that we've found to do that with these distributed battery assets. So how we contract for them, how we dispatch them, we're still writing the rules to that. We only just started deploying dispatching our first 2 megawatt virtual power plant 15 days ago with Sunrun. And so, that's something that we're continuing to kind of build credibility in and get the CEC to have confidence in. And so far, the initial feedback is really good. But yeah, it's, using these types of resources to fulfill our commodity obligations is a big part of this as well.
Did you say we launched our first virtual power plant 15 days ago?
Yeah, Resilient Home. We've given lots of updates on it. It's our plan with Sunrun.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I just didn't realize it launched 15 days ago.
Yeah, 1st of January 2023.
Congratulations. I mean, that's a really big deal. I remember when that was just a thought, and then they launched the one in Australia, and that's really cool. Huh, right on. So I see, Jim, you went back on mute, so I assume your questions are done. I have a couple questions, but are there other comments or questions from members of the CAC? Seeing none. Okay, so mine kind of fall into a couple different categories, and they are totally unrelated to each other categories. One, what is the total load that this would make up approximately?
The total load, so it's 3 megawatts of batteries and
3 megawatts.
6.2 megawatt hours. I'm sorry, 3 megawatts of solar and 6.2 megawatt hours of batteries.
Awesome. Okay, and then 6.2 megawatt hours, and totally different. You said that the contract that you're signing with, they've agreed to our prevailing wage and local contracting requirements. Just what are those requirements? I mean, at prevailing wage, everything is subject to prevailing wage. That's standard for the county. But what is the local and small local contracting?
Yeah, so Gridscape is an emerging small local business, and they operate out of Fremont, and they're hiring locally.
That's great. Is there a percentage requirement or goal or anything like that for EBCE projects for local and small local contracting?
There wasn't in this. So what we do is we have it's part of our evaluation criteria, whether or not you're a local small business. So they got a little bit of a bump through the evaluation process for their status as a small local emerging business. But the requirement in the contract is that the development of this is all paid prevailing wage. That's kind of the specific requirement in the contract.
That is great. And I love seeing SLEB businesses supported. It's a really good thing and an important thing. Looking forward, will any of these projects be subject to a PLA, or will they be aggregated in any way to make them union scale, or no?
No, that on the smaller deals like this, prevailing wage is kind of the limit. We haven't gone to any kind of a PLA with them.
Okay. And I do feel like this is really highlighting the importance of a strong NEM policy, like we are scrambling to take advantage of NEM 2.0 instead of 3.0. And it's really smart to be filing all those things ahead of time. So thank you for looking at that. And when I think about how that is also true for our customers, like really we had some pretty cool, strong NEM adders and concepts for customers of EBCE, and it would be cool to take a new look at those and see what we can do to be supporting and adding NEM customers in this new landscape. And at some point would love to hear what we are doing for ongoing efforts to oppose the NEM 3.0, because it's awful. It's opinion shared by a lot of folks, I think. So, okay, Cynthia.
Oh, thank you. As these contracts get approved, will there be a report back to the Community Advisory Committee? Just some update on the, on these projects coming online.
Oh yeah, we'll be happy to share good news. We're also happy to share when the news isn't so great, but hopefully we won't have much of that to share. So, as we do, we will kind of give the board updates on progress of programs. And so that'll probably be the standard form of updating on the progress of these reports. I mean, there's also a process whereby we report to the board on contracts entered into. So as we negotiate and execute these contracts, there'll be a report out on the contracts that are entered into. But I would certainly expect to be giving updates on kind of the development progression as we build these resources and put them online. I hope that it's something that everybody is interested in as we are, and so we would plan to come back and give you all an update on that progress.
Thank you.
All right, so I don't see any other members with their hands raised. Staff has asked us to weigh in on their proposal, what they're asking us for this evening, and what they will be asking the board for tomorrow night. In summary, again, is approval. Oh, I wrote it down. Approval to authorization to negotiate and execute a PPA with Sunwell for 4 cities covering 30 projects, with additional authorization to negotiate and execute a professional services agreement with Gridscape for approximately $1 million to put in as many NEM 2.0 applications as possible before the deadline. Is that right?
Perfect.
Sweet. All right. So at this point, I would be looking for a motion.
I would like to move the staff recommendation as stated.
Thank you, Member Landry. Is there a second?
I can second it.
Motion to support staff recommendation by Member Landry, motion to a second to the motion by Member Swaminathan. Seeing no further discussion, can we please take a roll call vote?
Yes, thank you. Member Landry.
Yes.
Member Hugh.
Abstain.
Member Liu.
Yes.
Member Swaminathan.
Yes.
Member Lakshman.
Yes.
Member Taria. Member Pacheco. Member Souza.
Yes.
Member Carr.
Yes.
Member Lewis.
Yes.
Vice Chair Hernandez. Chair Eldridge.
Yes.
Motion's approved.
you.
Excellent. And Member Swaminathan, I see your hand raised.
Yes, I'm doing a time check. I need to have a hard stop at 7:55. So just want to let members know.
Excellent. Well, we should be able to wrap by then. The last agenda item, Vice Chair Hernandez asked to be put on the agenda because he wanted to make a comment on it. He is not here to make that comment, so I'll do my best to remember. And this is item 7, extension of agreement with Weidman Group, which is adopt a resolution authorizing East Bay Community Energy CEO to negotiate and execute a 4th amendment to the consulting services agreement with Weidman Group to extend through the end of 2023, adding additional compensation in the amount of $125,000 for a total not to exceed $625,000. Is there a member of staff who can give a really brief update on this? And then I'll do my best to remember Vice Chair Hernandez's comment.
Yes, this is Alec Ward here. I can dive right in and keep it short.
Thanks, Alec.
Sure. Thank you all for having me tonight. Alec Ward, Principal Legislative Manager with EBCE. So just a quick overview of this contract here. Tomorrow, we'll be asking the board to permit us to contract with the Weidman Group for additional year for their legislative advocacy and advisory services that they offer to ensure EBCE's policies or policy issues are effectively supported from the state legislature. So this would be an extension for the same time span, that's 1 year, and also for the same amount, that is not to exceed $125,000 as we have had as set in all previous contract amendments. So we first signed with Weideman Group in 2018. Over the past 5 years, they provided critical services to our state legislative agenda, including they've advocated for the legislative stances that our board takes and votes on. They utilize their strong relationship with state legislature, energy agencies, and governor staff to promote our EBCE work. They set up countless meetings with the state legislators, agency leaders, governor office advisors, keep us informed at activities in all of these places. And they also help us come up with our legislative strategies to promote our stances as taken by the board. We've received only favorable feedback from our legislators and other public officials on Weideman Group's performance, and they've been widely regarded as a top advocacy firm in California. So I think that should be it for an overview for the contract there.
That was very efficient, and we are grateful.
Of course.
So again, going first to public comment, we would ask the clerk if there was any written correspondence received on this item, or if there are any members of the public with their hands raised.
We have not received any written public comment for this item, and there are no members of the public with their hands raised.
Right. So when the vice chair and I were setting the agenda, his comments kind of circled around a few things. One of them was wanting to know their efficacy with us, because it's a lot of money. And you covered that kind of briefly, but he's wondering how successful they've been in advocating for our positions. And then the second comment that came up was wondering if they have ever worked or coordinated with any of our constituent groups. We have some wonderfully active community members who represent significant organizations that also have professional lobbyists, and other member groups who organize member visits to the Capitol, and I'm wondering if there, and so I'm going to build off of that because it was a really good point. And I'm wondering if there has been coordination with any of our constituent groups to date.
Great, all great questions there. For efficacy, it's kind of it's always hard to, gauge and throw a hard quantitative fact at something like, political influence, but it's a constant question that we have for any political official that we meet with, any legislator, is when Weideman Group, when we're having side conversations, is always how do we think that they're going? I know Melissa last year also had a very thorough check-in with our legislators in the EBC territory on this exact issue. And of course, we've changed positions with Melissa, unfortunately, leaving. So it's something that I plan to undertake more formally sometime later this year, is exactly that sort of qualitative analysis on how they're doing. But anecdotally and by many conversations, they've been doing very well. And just looking at our success last year of what were our legislative priorities, what did we get passed, what were we able to stop from passing? It was a very successful year, and we think that they were crucial to be there in the middle of it, acting as quarterback and also representing us with all their relationships. And then for your next question about coordinating with constituent groups, we work very closely with Cal CCA. It would be great. We're also very much trying to build our work with other community groups and potential outreach here. That's something that I'm going to try to expand on this year. Weideman Group has been a great resource, though, by being very focused on our, exactly where we'd like to run and being the ones that can do exactly that. So we've seen a great benefit to having their services with us.
Thank you for that, for both of those answers. It's really helpful. Cal CCA has a JPA made up of CEOs, I think. Is that right? So they're not elected officials. It's a funny thing to call it a JPA, but there are some really active constituent groups that are member organizations that can also have some pretty strong influence, especially when it comes near election years. And, you know, we have some allies in the world, and it would be awesome if we utilize those. All right, so are there any other questions on this? Raise anything? No? All right, cool. This is an action item. I don't feel like we have to necessarily make a statement on this, but if someone would like to, we can. I could see more of your faces. We could do a thumbs up, thumbs down thing. Does anyone want to make a motion in support or opposition? All right, so I'm going to say that that's doesn't seem necessary, and we're just going to let that one go. Thank you so much, Alec. Unless you are seeking support, if you are seeking support for this, then we would be happy to make a motion.
I defer to you all if you'd like to support.
It's an agendized item for action.
It is
It's in the
agendized
consent
item for
agenda.
action.
Yep.
Oh, it's in the consent agenda? Got
Yes.
it. So that's the part where I don't know that we have to do something. So if anyone wants to make the motion, great. If not, we will go to the next agenda item. All right, we're doing it. So now we are moving on to agenda item number 8, which is member and staff announcements, including requests to place items on future CAC agendas. At this point, I will remind you that we have invited the new chair to the next meeting. And so in theory, he should be here on February 13th. So to prepare yourselves and ideally send me something that says who you are and what you care about and that kind of stuff, it would be really great. We can prepare that for him. Are there any other, Alex?
Good evening, Chair Eldred and members of the committee. Thank you. Yeah, I wanted to just propose one topic for discussion, which would be, as some may recall, the community innovation grants that our board approved with the new budget back in June, I believe. And they wanted to seek input from the CAC on implementing those community innovation grants. So, should it appeal to you and your colleagues on the committee to agendize a discussion item on that? I think that'd be great.
Great. Thank you very much. We will coordinate with you on when to put that onto the agenda for sure.
Thank you.
Thank you. Member Landry?
Thank you. I wanted to request rather, and we may need, as I understand it, perhaps a board motion. Yes, a motion here about following up on some of the concerns that Tom Kelly had regarding the reduction of carbon emissions. And the contention, that our organization has increased carbon emissions by, if I got this correct, by 3.5 times. So I know that you're going to be, talking to him this month, and if we could get a report back, but in general, beyond, Tom Kelly, obviously, I am concerned. I think all of us are concerned about the possibility of increased carbon emissions, and I just I want that. I don't know if that's a staff report, but
so Cynthia, if I can let you know that
yeah,
yes,
please.
Carbon emissions is something that will be agendized as we come up to those items on the board agenda that it correlates with. And yes, I've already set a meeting with Tom. So so thank you. That is noted. And always, as always, environmentalism is not something that we just talk about. It is something we actually care about, and something that will come before this body for sure.
Right. I guess what I'm really saying is, will you be reporting back to us, or is that?
It depends entirely. My goal is to figure out what he feels is not addressed, which doesn't necessarily mean that we have to come to agreement, but I want to know what he feels is not addressed, and then I will bring that to staff, as is the policy.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Cynthia. And any other, anything? All right, seeing none, Happy New Year, y'all. It is wild out there right now. Please help take care of your neighbors. Our unhoused neighbors are having an exceptionally difficult time right now. And some of the city responses have been really distressing. So be patient and be kind, and take care of yourself and your neighbors when possible. And this meeting is adjourned to Monday, February 13th, 2023. And we got you almost on time. Just 1 minute left.
Happy New Year, everyone.
Thank you.
Happy New Year.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Happy New Year.